Gerald stood in the middle of the company break room with his voice loud enough to make every single person freeze. He pointed straight at a guy in a plain gray hoodie and said, "Pack your stuff. You're done." "I don't keep deadweight on my payroll." The man in the hoodie didn't flinch. He just slowly set down his coffee cup and said, "Your payroll." Coworkers exchanged nervous glances. Some of them already knew what Gerald didn't. Hard cut, that man in the hoodie, that was me. And Gerald had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But let me back up, because this didn't start in that break room. It started the night he told my wife I'd never be good enough for her. My name is Derek Sullivan. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. My mom raised me on her own. I worked part-time jobs all the way through college just to keep the lights on. No fancy degree. No family connections, no mentor handing me a seat at the table. I taught myself software development through free online courses, and a whole lot of late nights sitting at a second-hand desk in a one-bedroom apartment, writing code until my eyes burned. 6 years ago, I started a small tech company. Nothing flashy, no venture capital, no press coverage, no splashy launch event. Just a B2B software platform I built piece by piece for mid-size logistics companies. Soltech Solutions. The growth was quiet and steady and real, and I was proud of every single inch of it. 3 years ago, I married Cassie. She is the best person I know, and I mean that without a single ounce of exaggeration. Her father, though, Gerald Whitmore, is a different story. Gerald inherited a mid-size manufacturing company from his dad, never let anyone forget it, and walked around like money was a personality trait he'd earned. From day one, Gerald made it very clear I wasn't the son-in-law he had pictured. At dinner one night, without even lowering his voice, he looked across the table and said, "Cassie deserves someone established." He didn't say it to me. He said it about me, like I wasn't sitting right there. I wasn't rich, I wasn't glamorous, I didn't dress like I had something to prove. But I had something Gerald never once bothered to look for. I had a plan. If you've ever walked into a room and been written off before you even opened your mouth, this one is for you. I know what it feels like to be judged by someone who thinks their status is the same thing as worth. That specific kind of dismissal, it stings in a place that doesn't go away easy. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this community is built for people who were underestimated and refuse to stay that way. Drop a comment and tell me, has someone in your own family ever made you feel like you didn't measure up? I am reading every single one. Let's get into it. Click hype if you're already feeling this. About 6 months before that break room moment, Gerald's manufacturing company hit a rough patch. His logistics software was outdated, bleeding costs, and 2 major clients were threatening to walk. Gerald was too proud to ask for outside help publicly, so he quietly went through a business broker to find a software vendor. Soltech Solutions, listed under its corporate LLC name, got the contract. When I saw the company name come through, I recognized it immediately. I sat there for a long moment, just staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to walk away from the whole deal. I didn't need the headache. I didn't need Gerald in my professional life. But Cassie looked at me and said, "Just keep it professional, babe." It's business, she was right, so I agreed to take the contract. I kept my ownership quiet, standard LLC operating procedure. Nothing unusual about it. My operations manager, a sharp guy named Pete, would handle all the on-site work. I'd stay in the background. For a while it was fine. Then Gerald started meddling. He began showing up to Soltech's on-site implementation meetings uninvited, acting like he was the one running the entire vendor relationship. He barked orders at Pete's. He demanded accelerated timelines that made no technical sense. He talked down to the tech team like they were interns who couldn't find the bathroom. Pete would call me after these sessions, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. One afternoon, Gerald showed up at the office without warning. I was in the break room running through server logs on my laptop, wearing my usual gray hoodie. Gerald walked in, looked me up and down, and said, "Hey, you in the hoodie. What's your title here?" I looked up at him, my father-in-law, standing there in his pressed blazer, not recognizing my face, and I said calmly, "I oversee operations." Gerald snorted. "Well, oversee yourself out of my way." "I need this station." I said nothing, I just picked up my laptop and moved. And I watched how he talked to people, the tone he used. The way he never once said please or thank you. The way he made every room feel smaller just by walking into it. Then later that week, Gerald pulled Pete aside privately. He told him he wanted that slouchy hoodie guy removed from the account. His exact words were, "He's got bad energy, get me someone who looks like they take this seriously." Pete was stunned. He came to me right after and relayed every word. Gerald Whitmore had just tried to get the owner fired from his own company. I want you to sit with that for a second. That week set off a chain of things I hadn't fully anticipated, because Gerald didn't stop at one move. He kept going. The first cut came through Cassie. Gerald hosted a dinner at his house to celebrate surviving a rough quarter. He invited Cassie but specifically told her it was a business crowd and that Derek would be bored. I found out about it through Cassie's cousin. I stayed home, I stayed calm, but I felt that one in a real way. The second cut came at a formal Sultec progress presentation. Gerald attended with his executive team. He didn't know I was in the room, sitting quietly at the back as a silent observer. When the presentation wrapped, Gerald leaned back in his chair and said to the room, "Solid enough work. But I hope the actual brains behind this aren't as sloppy as some of the people I've seen walking around here." The room shifted. People adjusted in their seats and looked at the floor. I held my jaw tight and didn't say a word. The third one was the one that really got to me because it went after Cassie. Gerald called her privately and told her he'd been doing some digging. He said Derek's company didn't look like much, a little LLC with no real assets. Then he pushed her to consider whether she had settled. Whether she had made a mistake, Cassie pushed back on him hard. But that night she came home rattled, and she told me the whole conversation. I watched her hands shake a little as she talked. And something inside me went very still, not angry, not explosive, still. Because I understood then how deep Gerald's manipulation actually went. This wasn't about business. It was never about business. It was about making sure Cassie second-guessed herself every time she looked at me. I didn't explode, I didn't confront him. I started quietly documenting everything: Gerald's behavior during on-site visits, his verbal directives to the team, his interference in contractual operations. I had a call with my attorney. I wasn't reacting. I was loading. Here's what Gerald didn't know. Our company policy requires recorded verbal authorizations for all scope changes on site. Every single time Gerald opened his mouth on that job site and directed our team to do something, it was captured. Every instruction he gave, every demand he made, every scope change he pushed through without authorization. Gerald had verbally directed Sultec employees to make unauthorized system changes on multiple occasions, bypassing the terms of the legal contract. Changes that, if anything went sideways, could expose his own company to serious liability. And then there were the emails. Gerald had sent emails directly to Pete demanding that the employee he thought was just some hoodie-wearing tech guy be, and I'm quoting here, "reassigned or let go. Interfering with a vendor's internal staffing is a contract violation." Gerald had committed it in writing. He thought he was running the show. He didn't realize he'd been handing me every card I needed, one arrogant move at a time. I quietly contacted my business attorney, Rachel Ockhuffer, and asked her to review every documented incident and draft a formal position paper, just in case Gerald ever pushed things too far. Turns out I wasn't the only one watching Gerald for a long time. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end introduced himself as Howard Finch, Cassie's late grandfather's personal attorney. Howard had handled the Whitmore family estate for decades. He'd watched Gerald operate up close for 30 years. He'd seen the way Gerald treated people with less power than him. And he reached out because he'd heard about the Sultec contract through channels I didn't ask about. Howard told me quietly that Gerald's company had been involved in a prior dispute with an outside vendor that got settled confidentially. Gerald had a pattern. Howard said he'd watched this man intimidate outside contractors more times than he cared to count, and he offered to be a resource if things ever got legal. He paused for a moment, and then he said, "Son, I've watched Gerald Whitmore bully people with less power than him for 30 years. I genuinely enjoy seeing someone finally hold the line." I thanked him and kept his number close. Meanwhile, Gerald was getting cockier. He told his executive team that the vendor situation was under control. He bragged about cleaning house on the tech side. He had no idea the house was mine. At home, Cassie finally confronted her father directly about his comments. Gerald doubled down. He looked at his own daughter and said, "Cassie, I'm protecting you. That man doesn't operate at your level. Cassie came home shaking with anger. I sat down next to her, took her hand in both of mine, and I said, "Let him think that. It won't last long." A few days later, Gerald requested an in-person contract renegotiation meeting. He wanted better rates. He was threatening to pull out of the Saltec deal entirely if he didn't get them. He expected to walk in, make some noise, and watch Pete fold. I put on a suit. The kind I don't wear often, but the kind that fits exactly right. I walked into that meeting room and sat down at the head of the table. Gerald froze the moment he saw my face. The color drained from his expression like someone had pulled a plug. He opened his mouth, nothing came out. I opened a folder, slid a business card across the table directly to him, and waited. Derek Sullivan, founder and CEO, Saltec Solutions LLC. The room was completely silent. Then Gerald let out a nervous laugh. "This is a joke, right?" My voice was flat and even. "No joke. I own this company, Gerald. Have since 2018, and we've got some things to talk about." Rachel Ackerfer was sitting 2 seats to my left. She set a packet in front of Gerald's team and began walking them through everything. The documented unauthorized verbal directives, the emails demanding a vendor employee be removed, the contract violations, every one of them captured, preserved, and prepared. Gerald's face went through about 6 different expressions in 30 seconds. Then he leaned forward and said, "You're my son-in-law." "This is family." I cut him off before he got another word out. My voice stayed completely calm. "You didn't know I was family when you tried to get me fired. So let's keep this professional." Gerald's team went pale, nobody said a word. The leverage had completely, totally flipped. Gerald's company was held to the original contract terms. No renegotiation, no discount. The documented violations were filed as a formal notice, giving Saltec full legal standing to walk away with penalty fees if Gerald or anyone on his team interfered with vendor operations again. Gerald never apologized to me directly. But for the first time in 3 years, he went completely quiet around me. That silence was louder than anything he'd said before. Cassie stood fully in my corner through all of it. A few days after the meeting, she sat across from her father and said very calmly, "You spent 3 years trying to make Derek feel small. How'd that work out?" I didn't gloat. "I finished the contract, I delivered excellent results. I let the work speak for itself the same way it always had." Gerald spent years judging me by my hoodie, my zip code, and my last name. He never once thought to ask what I'd built. That's the thing about people who inherit their power. They don't always recognize what earned looks like. If someone in your life has looked right at you and decided you weren't worth their respect without ever asking what you've actually built, this story was for you. I mean that with everything I've got. Drop a comment below and tell me, has someone underestimated you because of how you looked, where you came from, or what you drove? I want to hear it. Every single one. Subscribe to this channel. We tell stories for people who are building in silence while others talk. Click hype to help this story reach every person out there who's been overlooked and is about to show the world exactly what they missed. Did this story hit home? Let me know by liking the video and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Click hype to help this story find others who have felt the same way, people who have been dismissed, doubted, and decided to let their results do the talking. Your support makes a huge difference, and I'm out here reading every comment you drop.